Welcome inside the parlor. I had to go away with work this past weekend. Traveling with work is nowhere near as fun as traveling to go see Aston Villa, put it that way, which meant that I had to watch the first half of that Brentford match on dodgy airport Wi-Fi. Don't know if you've ever tried to experience this before, but dodgier than the high boot on Luca Dean, let's put it that way. Then I had to wait 8 hours and avoid the score at all costs before finishing with the second half in my hotel room. So this is not going to be the deluxe version of the Holy Trinity show like the last couple of episodes from England, but I got to tell you, I am absolutely delighted, bordering on over the moon with that point, because it was looking a little dicey there in the second half. You know what I'm talking about. Let's review it. Brentford 1, Aston Villa 1. Both me and my Sandra are suffering from mild Brum withdrawal, even though it's only been a week since we've returned home. That's hard to believe. It feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, I've told you, I've always felt this strong connection to England, but we had no idea how enamored we'd be with the people of Birmingham and the entire Villa family and fan base. I'm having an afternoon cuppa now. I'm going and buying full English breakfast ingredients. The whole 9 yards, I'm all in. I call it the Holy Trinity show because as a kid, the Trinity Road stand of yesteryear seemed like a holy place. And Trinity also means three. So it's the three key issues or moments that defined Brentford 1, Aston Villa 1. And we'll start with the key statistics. And if you look at these stats, they were weird. Looking at these numbers, you'd think that Villa actually bossed this game, which they clearly did not, especially in the second half. And I looked at duels won as a key metric here, but XG went to Brentford. Shots on target, Villa needs better conversion, but we had a higher accurate passing percentage. We had more possession. We did not win the duels in the midfield, which is often where things broke down or where the Brentford attack started. A recurring theme is the duality of Emi Buendia's performances, sometimes within a half, sometimes within a match. And people get mad at me when I offer constructive feedback on Emi Buendia's flaws at times, but I'm going to tell you, I've watched an unhealthy amount of football over the course of my lifetime. I trust my eyeballs, and normally the statistics back up what I see. And Emi Buendia had a really poor first half at Brentford to follow up on poor first halves at home to Forest and at home to Bournemouth. Now, in the Bournemouth game, he bounced back and had a very good second half. Not so much against Forest. In this game, he had the lowest player rating of anybody on the park in that first half, and by quite some margin. And the thing about our Argentine number 10 is that he does make many meaningful big chance contributions in these games. I just don't think he makes enough of them or often enough given the position he finds himself in. And my fear is he's so physically outmatched in that most congested part of the field that ball retention becomes a problem. Listen, consistency has been an issue with this player during his entire Villa tenure. Can he change? Absolutely, yes, he can. Will he be given the time to change by Unai Emery? That's the big question, because the stats don't lie. Well, here they are. The accurate passing was not good for a player in his role and in his position. He did not win a tackle. He had one of 3 successful dribbles, even though he does run into space so often. 4 recoveries, that's okay for his role. Only 33% ground duels won. And that, with being dispossessed 5 times, speaks to me about the physicality issue we're facing here. But he created 2 big chances. And ultimately, he earned the assist that gave Villa a point. And that's probably what we should remember. But oh, imagine if Emi Buendia was an 80-minute player week in and week out. So he can have a poor first half where he's not connecting with passes or he's not creating big chances, which is kind of his job, how many times is he able to turn into space, drive forward, and attack the opponents when it comes down to precision or decision? And when things are going well for Emi Buendia, like the Newcastle game, it tends to carry on. Or how about the Everton game? He comes on as a substitute. His very first touch sets up the John McGinn penalty. Then he goes on and scores a fantastic goal. The opposite occurs, however, when he doesn't have good early involvements, and it tends to snowball the other way. And because he's such a competitive guy and demanding of himself, I'm sure, maybe the most competitive guy on the team, it tends to get in his head a little bit. That works against him. And yet, he can have a poor first half and still be influential heavily, like in this game. And I think what's hurting him right now, he's not being challenged for his shirt. There's no Phil Coutinho, no Boubacar Kamara, because if Kamara was in the lineup, maybe John McGinn is challenging him in the number 10 role, which we've seen McGinn pull off pretty well a couple of times this year. Unai Emery is demanding of all players. He wants consistency. If Emi Buendia is challenged, and whether that's addressed now or in the summer, I think he may go from being a 45 to 50-minute player to more of a 75 to 80-minute player. And that's what Aston Villa needs out of him as their record signing. Big issue, Thomas Frank is no slouch. This is a very good manager getting the absolute most out of a squad that is probably valued in the bottom third of the Premier League, and he's been doing it for quite a while now. They pressed us hard. So hard, in fact, I think it forced us into a lot more long balls, many of the desperation variety, because their confrontation was so high and it was so persistent and intense. I think we had 20 long balls in this game, which is much more than during most of the games in this run. But Frank also made a halftime adjustment that led to one of the most stark changes in style from one half to the next by any opposition manager, certainly during this very good run, but maybe throughout the entire season. That's how different Brentford's first half was from the second half. Brentford started to drift long balls, especially diagonals, into the direction of or near our fullbacks in an attempt to turn them, stretch them, force them to sprint, force them into duels, which frankly, not the greatest for our two fullbacks. They're not the biggest guys in the Premier League, and I'm worried that other teams may look at this and go, that's the way to get at Aston Villa. Challenge them in those channels. And it worked, that direct approach. It led right to the first goal, which was a 70-yard ball from the goalkeeper to Mbeumo. And then from there, a succession of not such great plays, starting with Alex Moreno, who didn't really contain Mbeumo in that moment. The ball comes across, and Ashley Young, he's looking at the cross the whole way. He just whiffs on the ball. I mean, he sees it. And then, I don't think Robin Olsen was entirely set for when Ivan Toney got on the end of it. And, at that stage, it could have already been worse, but this was a very shrewd tactical adjustment that worked. Key moment, the miss by Schade. Villa has done a very good job over these last several weeks of containing big chances, but this was one of 4 big chances by Brentford, which just goes to show how opened up we were at times. And I don't know how Kevin Schade slept on Saturday night, because he won't enjoy seeing the replay of the opportunity. He just needed to take a breath, a beat. And if he did, it would have been 1-0 at that stage already. Huge let-off, big psychological boost for Villa and blow for Brentford, but it was really just a matter of delaying the inevitable. Big issue number 3, squad stretched. It's almost starting to look like the Just 14 early 80s Aston Villa. And by the way, this book speaks to me. I mean, a young lad, pre-teen, learning about girls, playing Subbuteo and football, following the mighty Villa from week to week. It's so good, and I can't wait for the movie. I saw the trailer for it. Thanks, Andy Dale, for the book, by the way. But that's how it feels. We're relying so heavily on so few, despite the fact that we had a week to recover from Newcastle. That second half looked disjointed, leggy. We looked vulnerable for the first time in a long time. And quite frankly, I think this squad depth issue, especially with 2 more games in the space of 7 days, is going to rear its ugly head at some point. We have got to get Matt Cash, Boubacar Kamara, and Phil Coutinho back in the mixed toot suite. And I could also understand how, as we go through this week, mental fatigue is going to start to creep in here as we legitimately start to change our focus to those European places. Big issue number 2. Debut distress. I could have thrown digestion in there. Debut digestive distress. As I told you earlier, I had to watch the first half on dodgy airport Wi-Fi, so lots of interruptions, dropout, and lo-fi video. Then I waited 8 hours. Imagine my shock and horror when I get to my hotel room, watch the second half, and there's Robin Olsen kitted and warming up to play. There was lots of speculation as to why Martinez wasn't back on the field. Somebody online said, well, he took one in the bolas, but as you and I know, Emmy's got a big set of bolas that are made of steel, so we knew that couldn't have been the problem. And then Unai Emery confirmed afterwards that it was a stomach virus, which maybe came on after the pre-match meal. Weird that it crept up and got worse to the point at halftime where he couldn't carry on. But if you've been there before, you know. You don't want to risk having a brownout or a big rooster tail as you're exerting yourself to make a goal kick. But he was having a very good first half, commanding, good on the ball, made a couple of big saves. So let's hope he's ready to go and set for Fulham on Tuesday, because he is so important to us for many reasons. The knock-on psychological effect, however, is that all of a sudden, your leader, a huge presence behind you that makes you feel a couple of inches taller, is not there. And I think psychologically that had an effect on the team, because when he's back there, first of all, there's instructions being given because he now knows exactly what's going on. His distribution is getting better. Clearly, that's something that they're working on. So you might get the ball up the field. But what about taking a little bit of risk, perhaps, with a pass? Or perhaps activating, overloading, joining from midfield or as a fullback to the attack, because if you lose it and the other team breaks, Martinez is going to come off his line and snuff it out, or he'll make a save. At the start of that second half, Villa felt ropey right from the beginning. And this is no disrespect to Robin Olsen, but it's not a situation that Villa needed or wanted at the time. Let's hope this is just a short-term thing, something maybe some Pepto-Bismol will help solve, and that he's back between the sticks against Fulham. And the number 1 big issue or moment that defined Brentford 1, Villa 1, Villa values. The first 4 letters and the first part of the word culture is cult. Cult is unconditional devotion to a way of thinking. And Aston Villa's way of thinking right now is to never, ever quit. Even if you're behind, even if you're at a place where you haven't had a whole lot of success. Last year, they took an early lead only to have that overturned. You saw the second half. Villa was stumbling around the ring, and yet they stuck with it because this is the most important tool those players have. They waited, they conjured a chance or two, and when that moment arrived, they took it. And in some ways, because of that, this result to me was almost more satisfying than the week before against Newcastle. And when Douglas Luiz bulged the netting late, this is how I felt, just like this. This is young Freddie, who just found out he's going to be a mascot at Wolves in the company of John McGinn as they walk out onto the park. In fact, Freddie runs a little bit like John McGinn, don't you think? This stat that Villa has scored in every single game since Unai Emery's been in charge is remarkable, frankly. Nobody else has done that in the Premier League. Think about that for a minute. And they conceded first. I could feel that Brentford goal coming from a long way away. In fact, I was surprised it didn't happen earlier. You might have felt the same way. So based on a couple of the other points I made, you could probably forgive the Villa players for mentally going, Well, it's been a good run. This is a good team. They're defensively solid. I'm chucking in the mental towel. And they didn't. First, it was a very good chance from Jacob Ramsey at around the 72-minute mark, and Jacob rushed it a little bit because it was beautifully concocted. And there were chances after the goal. But then Douglas keeps his cool late. And I talked about Buendia earlier. He had the presence of mind in a crowded, chaotic penalty area to just square it up at the critical moment. And Douglas Luiz does the rest. That is an absolutely incredible point to earn, and that's the difference right now between Brentford, who is trying to reel us back in, and Villa. They're finding ways to drop points. We are finding ways to gain them. I will very quickly glide through the categories we've been tabulating throughout the past couple of seasons because not a lot changed. The away record did improve slightly, 22 of 48 points, but the Ollie Watkins consecutive goal-scoring streak away from home is over. No set-piece goals either way. Brentford neither top or bottom six, and Emi Martinez got halfway towards a clean sheet. Not so sure if the sheets at home were clean, given his gastrointestinal distress. You get it, his clean sheet. Never mind. Up next, just another huge match in the quest for European football. Under the lights Tuesday night at Villa Park against the Alexandra Mitrovic-less Fulham. Now, if I'm a Villa player, I'm looking at that home game and thinking, we should be expecting to get a result against this side, despite the fact they're coming off a 2-1 win at home to Leeds United, but form hasn't been the greatest for the Cottagers of late. And Villa players might also be recalling the game at the Cottage earlier this year and thinking maybe some retribution is in order. My only fear, even though it's the same for both teams, is how fast this game comes around, and as I mentioned earlier, how reliant Villa has been on so few players in the last couple of weeks. Hopefully, I'll be able to watch the entire Fulham match uninterrupted from tip to tail and provide a little bit more comprehensive analysis than this Brentford game, but my regular day job is annoyingly demanding right now. Still, this Brentford point could be as crucial a point as we've earned all season, both mathematically and psychologically. Until Tuesday, under the lights at VP, be well, be positive, and as always, up the mighty Villa.